Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the LTS podcast. I'm hoping that everyone is having a great Tuesday night. I am still a little warm, but can't complain. But we are here talking to a young lady, Miss Bridget Brown, more about affordable housing. We discussed it on the last podcast, and she is from UCHC in the Detroit area that helps Detroit residents remain in their homes. And I appreciate her coming on tonight. How are you this evening?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing really well, and I'm very excited to be here.
Glad for you to be here. I would love to know more about the nonprofit that you work for.
Yeah, so UCHC stands for United Community Housing Coalition, and we very proudly are basically instituted to help represent low-income families across the city of Detroit with representation, support, and ownership. So what that looks like is if someone is facing, unfortunately, an eviction, we are, part of the team that represents you in your court case. We also provide wraparound services. So we try to ensure or support people with arrears or other financial supports that we can provide to get them in their best situation. Additionally, we do tax foreclosure prevention. We'll do land contract buyouts. And we also do home repairs. Basically, you're all-in-one home nonprofit, I'll say. And we've been around for 50 plus years, which is generally pretty incredible.
Yes.
And, we really want to be there with the residents and make sure that we can create more stable neighborhoods.
Yeah, I understand that you have been in business for over 50 years. I was like, wow. When I did my research, I was like, wow, that long? I was like, that's an accomplishment in itself. What are the main problems that Detroiters have when they come to you?
Well, let's be honest. Everyone is facing quite a financial crunch these days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm in a family of 4, and our grocery bills, every time we just leave the front door, right, you're talking $200 just to get a one-time grocery visit. And if you do more than that, which everyone pretty much has to, right, you're just living on very, very tight means. And again, honestly, that all builds up. It's not just food. It's all of your expenses, all of your bills that have been grown over time, and it's hard to keep up with. So we do see a lot of income issues with our clients, but we also see equally problems with the housing that they're in, right? So it is not uncommon for us to see very significant issues in a rental properties. For example, we've seen trees growing in the middle of a floor, or a hole in a kitchen's floor. Or, we start to talk about drafty windows and, air conditioning problems. Heat mostly is problematic in that situation, especially for our seniors. But the list just goes on. And I think we're all experiencing that crunch, but it just is compounded with our low income or our low income residents. And if we don't start to work this out and figure out alternatives, we're going to be in a real crisis, even though we already are, right? It's just going to continue on. So that's what we aim to do, is try to help remedy some of these problems. Our team has been really focused on upstream work as much as possible to prevent the traumas and other things that families face in these scenarios, but it's not easy. And we need a lot more people to be able to do it. We need a lot more conversations about what's going on and how to tackle it together. Because we are certainly, we are a pretty big umbrella, but at the same time, we need our partners. We need our community members. We need to be talking about this.
LHG, you have any questions you want to ask?
I want to go back a little bit. I want to go to Ms. Bridget. Your background has been in service for a while. I saw that you were working with gleaners prior to UCHC, you serve on boards. So what has been the driving force that makes you want to stay in the service industry, helping the community? What is that? What's that factor that makes you go to that?
Well, let me start with I love Detroit. I have always loved Detroit.
Awesome.
My grandfather grew up in Fitzgerald. Like the only reason he moved was because his job went to the East Coast. But otherwise, I remember the stories he would tell. He played the organ at different churches around the city. His father was, he was born and raised. His father was a professor at the University of Detroit Mercy. And I always admired him as just the smartest man I ever knew, to be honest with you. No offense to the men that I know now. I know a lot of really smart, intelligent people, including the people on this podcast. But there was something magnetic about him. And he was the quietest person I knew too, which just was like that, that strength there. And so I wanted to go to Detroit Mercy. I wanted to follow that because I thought, well, if they produced him in the city, the city was there for him and his, upbringing, that must be a good place to be. And so I came here and I fell in love with it. But really the I'll say call to service stemmed probably from generally him again, but also my grandmother who he was married to, and they just really cared about giving back to the community. So they were always in service groups, St. Vincent de Paul, or you name it, right? Habitat for Humanity. I started volunteering in when I was really young. I thought I would want to be in nursing, which was one of the many reasons I wanted to go to Detroit Mercy. But that was not a good path for me, I'll be honest. I just don't have the broken bone thing, or, it just for a lot of reasons was not the right path. But the core of that was because I wanted to give back. And, I was one of 4 children growing up. My parents struggled. I remember being in the grocery store where my dad had $3 left before payday. And we were like, what are we going to do? I remember those moments. And if I can help other people get through that period of time and create a more sustainable environment for them, right? We all have hard times across life to some degree, some more than others. And I think, especially in Detroit, we see all of the other systemic issues that have occurred. But if there's something that I can do, I want to do that. So yes, I did start at Gleaners. I was at Gleaners for over a decade and loved that. I think a lot about, just how systems could potentially work, because there's a lot of pantries across the city, but also across the region that work together. And I think that, if we could bring that into another industry, right, there's a lot of partnerships that happen, but we're all kind of still siloed to some degree. And in just the blessings I've been given across life, this role came up and I thought, well, if you're thinking about me for this, I want to be in this city like full time.
Yes.
I just love the energy. I love the grit. I love the kind of like the attitude that can come along. I think it's fantastic. I think it's real and honest. And I wanted to be contributing to that. So that's ultimately why UCHC, why housing. I just, it's the biggest expense. And it's one that people often have to put off because they are for their children's food or taking care of their mental health or the other things. And then when you wrap it all together, like we need help. We need help together.
Yes.
So, yeah,
absolutely. And let me just go back a little bit, because my introduction to UCHC went back to 2008, and they're calling that a recession back then, when the housing market just really took a turn. And I was a tenant in a home owned by a relative. And the relative, unfortunately, went into foreclosure in the home, unbeknownst to me. And so I started getting calls from my friends saying, hey, Harris, your house is on, the auction list. What's going on? I'm like, no, it's got to be a mistake. And I call the relative and it's like, oh, yeah, it's a mistake. But then the letters start coming. And then you get this 7-day demand to vacate. And I just Googled free legal help. It brought up Michigan Legal Services, which linked me to UCHC. And when I tell you it had to be a divine moment. I knew nothing about this process. This home was in our family, and I was young before my daughter was even born. When I first got into the home, was paying the rent faithfully, and being given this notice to leave. I just had my baby. Actually, when I got this notice, I was devastated. I was loving living on my own, had a decent job. I did not qualify for traditional government assistance because they're very particular about the poverty level, the number of people in your home. There's a method to that. And many of us don't qualify for help with some of the organizations. But getting the legal help allowed me to get a couple more weeks to be able to move. We weren't able to come to an agreement with the mortgage company. It was too far gone. And I didn't know enough about foreclosure to where it takes a while for this process to unfold. But unfortunately, the relative was accepting my rental payments, but they weren't going to the bank. So imagine being in court with your family, you on one side of the room and they're on the other. So the emotional aspect of that it was very traumatic for me. And I had to say to them, I'm not angry that you're losing the house. I'm angry that you didn't tell me. And the response was, well, I don't have to tell you, But they were looking at the fact that I was their relative, but not a tenant.
Right.
And when you intertwine family and business, sometimes those lines can be blurred. So had to get the family there, help me move. But I could remember having my counselor going in for the intake, and having a person that listened to me, that understood me. I was very honest. I had a decent job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being in the chat. We appreciate you. Welcome, everybody. I was embarrassed. I was angry, a lot of emotion, and talking about it now, a decade or two later, I now see that there was a trauma involved in that. I mean, I was in that house for a while. It was a family home, and in my head, it was supposed to be in our family forever. And now I have to not only move, but my family, who's my support when it comes to my daughter, they're going to a different city. Mm-hmm. So I have to move in with them. I'm laying on her floor, the same person who owned the house. Wow. And it's like, this is a lot. But UCHC was that angel that at least explained some things to me, got me a little bit more time, and then helped me to locate an apartment of my own. And at that time, helped with the first month. Go back. They helped me realize when you look for housing to ask certain questions. Mm-hmm. To make sure you know who the real owner is. I didn't know anything about that. I just wanted a place to live. But my counselor made it clear, as you're searching, LaTanya, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. So you gotta, when you find a place, you gotta let us know so we can research and make sure it's legit. Mm-hmm. And getting into my apartment and starting over, oh wow, what a godsend. And then I got a call from my counselor, like, would you like to be on the board? We need tenants. And those of you who don't know, the board is made up of real people who've also had real issues, real housing crises of their own, who understand. I'm not some millionaire tycoon with a power suit on. This was my life. So this organization means so much to me. And let's segue into, when it comes to a person that's facing a housing crisis, Bridget, can you walk us through what could UCHC possibly help them with if they're in a situation, maybe even like mine, maybe due to no fault of their own, the landlord did not pay the mortgage, which now leaves them to have to move, or maybe it was their own, they just couldn't pay the rent. What's the process?
Yeah. So first I want to start by saying, our counselors at UCHC and our attorneys and anyone that does the direct service is meeting people most often on their worst day.
Oh, yes.
So, right. We're overwhelmed. A lot of people did exactly what you did, which is let's search what is out there, but also what is the problem, right? Like, unfortunately, your story is not uncommon.
Wow.
And that's the sad truth. I know that there's a mother and daughter going through court. Like that's unfortunately fairly regular. Wow. Sometimes it's from just situations that arose from disagreements, but other times it's those things that the other person didn't know enough about, right? Tax foreclosure prevention is another thing that we do. And often people don't, maybe it's a generational house, so someone else is supposed to be paying and it just slipped through the cracks somehow, right? That kind of stuff does happen with some regularity. But again, we're meeting people on their toughest day. So first, we have to come in with the patience, the calm, the understanding that we're going to get the first snippet and then we're going to have to dig in a little bit more, right? Okay. So we need to know, like, okay, so what led to that? Why were they doing that? Because then we might have a defense for you in court that's different than what you would even think, right? Or do you want to stay? Are we trying to redeem this situation? Are we trying to exit and exit quickly? What is going on? So really our people, they just care so much. We have such a wonderful staff.
Yes.
I'm so glad to hear that situation was fantastic for you in the end.
Yes.
But obviously the pain, the trauma, the issues that occurred during that period, it compounds, right? And we usually get to a point where we're like, I just can't handle one more thing. And so we try our best to do that wraparound service, that resource navigation, that what can we do to get you back on your feet as well as possible to take the next step forward. And that's why obviously we do advocate for case management and all these other things, because the honest to God truth is too, like I said at the beginning, like a lot of people fall on hard times pretty regularly, and we might recover the first time, we might recover the second time, and we made it by with the skin of our teeth. But then the third, the fourth, the fifth, that's a lot harder because you just went through this and you're trying to swim and it's just, you're not making the progress. And so we try to help make that progress along the way. And, I think there's a lot of different scenarios that we find. We find landlords that have been shady across time. Let's be honest. Certainly that's a big component, but we also see those issues where people just didn't know. And so we try to educate and say, okay, here's how to prevent this from happening in the future. But again, a lot of our people have cyclical issues, right? We've probably all been in a scenario where, okay, a flat tire occurred. Okay, now I have to pay that immediately because I got to get to work. But then the next situation, because now I'm at work, but I don't have money for the kids tonight, or I'm going to have to put that bill off for a week or two until I can gain back my speed. So, that's all stuff that we try to navigate. And unfortunately we can't provide financial services for every single client.
Right.
But we do try to navigate them toward resources that can be supportive. Right. In my mind, I always go to food because it's the easy one. And it's where I spent so much time in my past, but it's, food gets so costly so quick and we don't think about how it builds up. But if we can, right, as an agency, as that larger entity, work with others to figure out those nuances, to take that burden away. So you just go make it happen.
Yes.
That's what we kind of work towards. So, like I said, every scenario, every person's slightly different. There's a different reason they are where they are. There might be a repair issue with the house. And so you had to, because you don't have hot water or running water, you moved into a hotel and now your landlord's taking you to court because you didn't pay your rent, but you just had to stay in a hotel and they said they would fix it, right? There's the stories could go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we really, that's why we're here. And that's why there's a pretty large group of us to navigate this with people.
Absolutely. And my counselor worked with me to establish a budget. And I think the part that was different for me is I didn't think that I had a large enough income to even do that. I think we assume that because if you're low income, you can't budget. But whether you have a low income or you're middle class or whatever you want to call it, we all need one. We've got a good question in the comments. Welcome, Fred Beatty. Thank you all for coming through. Mr. Beatty from Trailblazers Radio says, how important is having clean, livable, and affordable housing for a person's mental health? Great question.
Yeah. So you can kind of see that where there's a mental health issue, the affordable housing crisis or issues with affordable housing can kind of compound on top of it, right? So first and foremost, if you don't have safe housing, that is in itself quite a big mental load. And then when you have that mental load and then you start to experience these other elements that could put you further into, a state that's hard to recover from. It keeps building off itself, right? So first we have people that have mental issues and people that don't, right? We serve everyone and anyone that we possibly can, but I would say like the traumas build up. So I think I saw one time when I was freshly starting at UCHC. I've been here just over 3 years, but I was really interested in the cross section of food and housing and the other basic needs, right?
Yes.
I started to look into that, and I thought, okay, so first I see before an eviction filing happens, there's an uptick in people applying for SNAP and other resources.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that people are resilient. So they're trying to make it through, and that they're at their tail end and they're trying to figure it out. Okay.
Yes.
That's a good thing, right? However, once the eviction filing occurs, people often lose hope. And that can just exponentially grow any other issues that are going on, because if you lose hope, it's so much harder to do everything. And if you've got 5 or 10 things on your list, you might get to one. And we see it often, right? There's paralysis in some of these situations. So an eviction filing happens and a spike occurs, right? And then all of a sudden, the hope, it just plummets. And then you have to actually, just to get to base zero, you have to do so much more work. So much more work. And we do not talk about that trauma as something that we have to work through. So our team tries to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible. We are doing upstream work with eviction diversion. So before a filing occurs, we're trying to do case management and navigate that. We're just in its pilot stages, but we've been pretty successful so far. Hopefully that will expand. But within the court system, we used to pick up your case at filing if we could afford to represent you, walk you through the resources that are available. And then once we were down the road, and we were at judgment, that's when we would institute the wraparound services. Are there financial resources available? Those things. Well, knowing this pattern, right, where you start to lose hope. Yeah, maybe you have representation, so you're hanging on with a thread at that point.
Yes.
You can mitigate it further by addressing the issue faster. Yes, we learned. So in doing that, we actually started the instant a case is picked up or we're aware of it and they might qualify for resources, we immediately inject housing counselor, right? Beyond just the attorney. We say, okay, is there financial means to support this house? In particular, if they have subsidies or other things, because we know that again, that's compounding trauma. If you lose your subsidy, you could lose it for life. So we try to, prevent that from happening. But in doing so, we reduce the time frame of the actual court case itself from over 90 days down to 13.
Wow.
And if we can do that, right, yes, you're still experiencing trauma, but you're not in the duration of how it continues on, right? So it's a more immediate, quick, short-term thing. It doesn't mean it's any less traumatic and problematic. But if we can redeem you quickly and work with you hand in hand, that's what we're doing. So with that program, and we did that successfully in 2025, and we lost funding shifted. So we've got only, a small amount of means to make this happen. But ultimately, we do know that's the right path.
Yes.
And in doing that, we were able to save over 800 subsidies last year. And we assisted over 900 cases. Where in the previous years where we did it at later stage, right, you're building that trauma. You went to court because you weren't able to pay. Now you're in your second or third month and you're unable to pay. So the number just keeps growing. And this is getting out of control. So we try, again, I wish we had more funds to support this work, but we try our best to see if we can nip it earlier. It's less costly. It's more meaningful. And if you can stay in that house, the beautiful story you told, but if we could have kept you in that house, how much more meaningful would that have been, right? And then your whole family would be on that path.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that we were able to do more for you in another way. But, thinking about how this all plays out, it just gets more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. And then all of a sudden you're going to your court case instead of working, and you got sick. So now you're out again. And now you've lost your job because all these things just happened. And this is very real. It's very real.
Yes, it is.
So, I wish we could continue to do more. And that's why I'm here, is to figure it out, right? To make better systems as best as possible and to help people as quickly as we can.
Thank you for that. We got a part 2 to Fred's question. Does your organization partner with local and or state organizations to assist those who need access to affordable housing?
Great question. Yes, of course. So one of our largest partners is the city of Detroit itself.
Okay.
And we do have a few grants with them to do some prevention work, mostly related to the, at this moment in time, the actual representation in court, but also if someone does end up being evicted before they end up in the shelter, we have intervention dollars for that point.
Oh, great.
I'm continuing to advocate, though, that we go upstream with it.
Okay.
Because we know it's, again, less costly, less traumatic, all the things that were just mentioned, and it can really create better stabilization. And I think that, that's where we ultimately want to go. But so yes to local, absolutely. Okay. And yes to state. So UCHC is kind of an interesting agency because we are 50 years old. And our executive director and our fierce leader is Ted Phillips, and he's been in his position for about 40 of those years, which is pretty incredible. Okay. And so lots of longevity. He's an attorney, and he's just got the biggest heart of gold.
Yes, he does.
And so, so during COVID, we were actually one of the HARA agencies, which means that the COVID assistance rental dollars, actually part of them came through us. So we went from a less than 30 person agency to 150. And now we're about 75 and trying to make this all happen. And it's a really cool thing. But ultimately, right, we do try to work with the municipalities, but it's not enough. It's
Wow. We got a few more comments coming through. I want to welcome into the chat Miracle Norred. She is an absolutely beautiful young lady I met. I met her when she was training on a class regarding youth mental health. And I just attended her event this past Saturday, which was all about restorative housing and food access. She's got a great question. She says, good evening. What resources are available for people who are facing eviction with a 7-day notice, trying to avoid court?
So I'm going to be honest, resources are pretty scarce. However, I would call the helpline at the city. And I can, sorry, LaTanya, I don't have the number offhand, but maybe I can get that to you to share with the audience. But I would call the helpline at the city. They will help you navigate most immediately. Okay. But beyond that, I would say the one thing I see most often is a problem with the relationship between the landlord and the tenant. And I would honestly first start with your landlord and see, like, hey, if you know that you're struggling to pay, but you've got a plan, communicate that with them. Let them know what exactly is going on. So, because there's a chance that they will just dismiss it, right? They can absolutely not file if you reach out, right? That's a choice of theirs. If they do and we meet you in court, we actually do try to do outreach pre-court. And then even if you miss your court case, but if it does happen, we have staff there for income eligible folks to have support. If you are not income eligible, we still try to give consideration and try to help with counsel and advice to ensure that you're not walking in empty-handed or anything like that. So we do our best there. But I would also say 211 with United Way is a fantastic resource. Take a look at those and see if there's a way to work through it. There you go.
Okay, we got the helpline on the screen. And we got a question about how they can support the agency as far as monetary donations and pledges.
Okay. So if you go to our website, UCHCdetroit.org, that's a great way to just participate on an individual level. But I actually want to ask for another favor too, which is if you're a Detroit resident, right to counsel right now is certainly, I don't want to say it's not going away, but it is downsizing quite a bit. And that's going to be pretty problematic for our neighbors, because if we can't represent you in court, right, you're going to face that trauma impact that continues on. And really, we want to be there for people. We have almost 20 attorneys on our staff alone that address issues. And so we want to make sure that we're there for our residents and supporting them, because until you experience the issue, you most likely don't know about it.
Yes.
You don't know how to navigate it. And without attorneys in court, it really isn't fair, because most of the landlords are represented by attorneys.
Okay.
And it creates such an equitable environment that's our goal. We want to make sure everyone has representation, but also that there's just an equitable opportunity to speak their case. Pre-COVID, when we didn't have representation in court to that level, there would be 1-minute hearings.
Wow.
The judge saying, "Landlord, what happened?" And then the judge issuing their decision. That's ridiculous. That's not in service to the community, and we need to be better about that. So we do have the representation that help advocate for what we're doing.
Yes.
Help advocate. If you see friends, neighbors, also tell them about what we can provide.
Yes.
So that we can articulate, like, this is not a one-time issue for these folks. There's a lot that comes up, and the better intervention that we can provide and actually be with people in their experiences, the better they are in the long term. We know this. So I would ask you to, advocate for right to counsel, advocate for dollars to go to arrears so that we can get people back up and standing again. And again, that prevents displacement. It prevents your neighbor from having to move away because something traumatic happened to them. And so in addition to the dollars and going to our website, so thank you for that. I always appreciate it. All the dollars will go to our programs, right? So continue to support, continue to talk about it, because it is important. And I think that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah,
absolutely. Dr. Vertangi was asking about possible resources for those that may need appliances. Are there any partners that may be able to help with that, Bridget?
So we are a partner in the Detroit Housing Repair Network, or DIRT fund, sorry. And through that, with DTE and other funders, Rocket being a major one, we're able to do repairs in people's homes. For the most part, people are part of our portfolio already. However, the reason I say that is because those people do, to a certain extent, receive refrigerators and stoves and hot water heaters from our DTE partner. So we do partner with DTE, and anybody can do that. So it's not just having to be through the UCHC pipelines specifically. You could be a resident and you can go onto the DTE website and see what they can do for you. And there are agencies even in specific neighborhoods that will help address those situations. So I would recommend going onto that website and seeing if you can make your way onto one of the waiting lists that's there. I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of people asking, but we're trying to make our way through the list as fast as possible to address the needs, because we know the housing stock here, we need help, and appliances are so expensive. And you can't eat out every night. So how are you going to feed your kids? How are you going to make sure your hot water tank, how you're going to bathe, all those things, it's really important. So, yeah, if you're part of our network, we will work with you. We'll try to help navigate if you need to call us directly, but I would recommend going through the DT website for any repairs.
Awesome. Back to you, Leonard.
Okay, my question is, you work with the city and the state. My question is, why not federal?
Good question. Well, there's been a lot of changes on the federal level, as you know. But most of our funding that we would qualify for gets funneled through the state first. So state dollars most often are federal dollars just reallocated, or city dollars, quite frankly, reallocated. Why not more than that? Because they never have said yes to us. I am trying, I promise.
I know you are.
We applied for several grants, especially around right to counsel, to continue that practice. But we were not, unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting that grant. But we hope for more in the future, for sure.
It's ridiculous that they have an affordability bill. The housing voted, let's do this. The president doesn't want to do it, and he needs to look at what's going on in this country. The main problem right now is affordable housing,
absolutely,
especially in Detroit. I mean, the one thing I will give the city credit over the last maybe 10 years. They've worked a lot better in terms of affordable housing, but my problem is this. When you have buildings that are not that old, maybe 10, 15, 20 years old, and you can rehab those buildings and make them into affordable housing, or what you can do is get rid of these so-called slumlords that own these buildings and letting them rot.
Yep.
Either buy the buildings or you take it away from them and rehab those buildings. I feel need to do more of that.
Hey, you won't hear me. I completely agree with you. One of the things that recently we walked into was a relationship with the land bank. And it's because we genuinely want, first, anyone that's occupying properties to be safe. So to navigate that, but also, are there houses that can be redeemed, that are in that portfolio, that instead of having demolished, we can do the repair work on, right? So we're working with them on projects like that. But I agree. If we're willing to spend $20,000 per rental property to demolish, individual home, single homes, up to $20,000, and in some other cases up to 30, and then you talk buildings even more, why would you not invest that in preventing the property from becoming that problem in the first place? I think there's a lot of people that are trying really hard, and it is a complicated issue. However, I do think we need to take a step back and look at the system, right?
Yes.
So instead of addressing the immediate concern, it's like your doctor, right? You go in, you say you have a headache. Well, they say, okay, well, take this pill to get rid of your headache. You're done with your medication. All of a sudden, the headache's still there. You didn't actually fix the problem,
right?
So let's get to the core of the problem. And that is why I like the repair network that happens, because that's the goal, right? Is to save the housing stock and make it livable conditions for all families, and teach them how to be homeowners and take care of it next and all those things. But you're absolutely right. How many landlords have gotten away with letting their home go into disrepair, and then they say, well, the resident didn't pay, so I didn't make the repairs. Well,
wow.
What? I mean, that doesn't mean, so you're going to let your property go downhill because there was a financial issue. And what I'm finding out is a lot of these folks do not have relationships with each other. So echoing what I said
earlier, a problem.
Having a relationship with your landlord or whatever is pretty important.
Yes, it is.
I think that's a big deal. But ultimately, I do think we need to say, like, how do we prevent that from happening in the first place? Again, can we go upstream? What happened? And then let's navigate backward, right? And I think if we took that more seriously, we'd spend way less money in general. And there would be a much more productive discussions, and neighborhoods would be stabilized to a greater extent. I think there's a lot of great work that's happening. So I'm not trying to downplay that, but there's just so much. And we're willing to say, oh, that's that house is going downhill. It's not worth saving. Well, why didn't you think about that 5 years ago?
Right.
And actually save it instead of spending money on maintenance until it gets into such disrepair, it finally gets taken down.
Absolutely. And in desperation, sometimes I can speak for myself when you're looking for a home.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Sometimes you know the home is not really livable, but you're in such a bind and you need a place so fast that I believe some people just accept housing that really is not safe. It may be affordable, but it's not safe. And I was introduced to a term when I was at the event last week with my sister, Coach Miracle, a trauma-informed approach to housing, where you take the time to look at why people make the choices they make, but how they've been traumatized and having to move from place to place. It has mold. The doors aren't secure. The area isn't secure. And speaking of that, how does UCHC handle landlord-tenant issues?
Well, being the tenant advocates that we are, we're pretty fierce in court. So you definitely want us on your side. And we're also going to be honest, right? If your situation is far enough down the path, we're going to say, look, we want to get this eviction so it off your record. And in order to do that, here are what your options are, right? But our ultimate goal is to always keep you in your house if that's where you want to be.
Yes.
A lot of people don't want to be there. To your point, the location was subpar to begin with. We were in a desperate space because we were going to be evicted or whatever it is, or we had a family situation or got into an argument with a loved one, whatever it is that landed us there. And we just signed the paper because that seemed good enough in the moment.
Yes.
And then we look back and we just think, oh, this is not the right space. And I think, again, we all go through different scenarios where we would probably make that same decision if it meant that we weren't on the street, but that's where we should stay. And certainly the landlords need to be held accountable. So we are very much advocates of the certificate of compliance. I will bend and say, like, I think that the system and getting your certificate can be a little bit cumbersome in that small landlords aren't as educated, but it's still like a core. You should have an appropriate house to actually put someone in. You shouldn't put someone in a house that is unlivable. And it is pretty ridiculous that has been allowed to happen over time.
Absolutely. Now, we've been talking about renting. What about transitioning or helping a family transition from renting to ownership? What does that look like with UCHC?
I will say, I think that's one of our favorite things to try to do. So we have our Make It Home program, and specifically Make It Home. Over 50% of the classes each year tend to be tenants that become homeowners. And so to kind of echo the previous issue, that means that a landlord ended up in tax foreclosure and didn't pay their taxes, and the property becomes eligible for the person that lives in it. So we use the city's right of first refusal. We do have a partnership with the county and the city to make all those things happen, in addition to Rocket, who actually affords us the ability to purchase those properties based on the taxes that are due. And then we sell small loans, right? So then we get paid back, and the next person we are able to give some love to and hopefully go through the same program. Not every single person that tries to go through that program qualifies. It might be that they're in a different, right? It might be that it's year 2 of someone in delinquent taxes, so they haven't quite gotten to that process. But we start educating at that time of like, well, if they don't, here's what the steps are, or hey, it isn't your property. Don't pay the taxes that someone else neglected to pay. That's a big one because people freak out. They think, there's a yellow bag. I don't own this place, but I can't lose my home. I better pay this.
Right.
And what they're doing is doing a favor for the landlord that should have been the responsible entity.
Yes.
So it is one of our favorite things to do, not only for that program, but in general, just making homeowners. How many people pay $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 in rent?
Yes.
You could actually be a homeowner and potentially in the city have a land contract for less than $1,000. And then that's theirs. They get equity in it. It is theirs for forever. They can pass it down to generations. They can sell it. They can do whatever they need. What a beautiful thing. Now, not the fit for everybody, right? But dang, if we could make more homeowners, I feel like that is a powerful way to go. And
So
you talk about
powerful.
generational wealth and fixing the system and all of that. I think that's going to be a real treasure. And we have some projects, hopefully, that we'd like to pilot soon. And so I'm really hoping that we do more of it. But thus far in our history, we've done, older records we're not totally clear on, but I would say over the last 10 years, 11 years, 2,300 homes we've been able to make. We've been able to make 2,300 families homeowners.
Awesome.
And we plan to continue it and grow it to the greatest degree that we can.
That is amazing. And talk about something that will help mental health, because we're really big on mental health on this platform. And I finally became a homeowner at 50 years old last year. So just the fact that you have your own home, it just makes you finally have that satisfaction of this belongs to me, and I'm going to do all that I can to keep this as a legacy. I can pass it on to my daughter. How much of this process, Bridget, is education? I feel like so much of this, people don't always go into even renting with a full understanding that you have rights, and then into home ownership, what comes with home ownership. How much of this would you say it's really just education?
I think education would prevent a lot of the scenarios from unraveling further. I mean, eviction, like I said, there's a lot of reasons that people fall into that, but knowing your rights is so important. So thank you for saying that, because we do try to do education across the city to ensure that people understand, like, your landlord can't lock you out without legal proceedings. Your landlord can't just show up and walk through your apartment without your approval. Though, I mean, we could go on and on and on about those things, but also home ownership education. You know, if you don't have a mortgage, your mortgage or you know your agreement well enough, you might not know that you're the one that's supposed to pay your taxes.
Right.
So that's a problem, right? Or in some of our land contract buyout situations, you thought you were entering into a scenario where, that balloon payment, that's 5 years away. I'm going to be in a better financial state. Things happen. And all of a sudden you're coming up on year 5 and you have this balloon payment, but you're trying to navigate that. And you find out that, well, you were late 3 years ago. So you're not even eligible to be the purchaser, because in your land contract, it says that if you're ever late, it defers back to a landlord-tenant situation, and your landlord didn't tell you. So he was allowing you to keep paying, right? These are not uncommon. These are crazy, like, predatory contracts, right? That's what they are. But it keeps compounding. And so financial education is important, right? Even if you have no money or very, very, very little, knowing where that's going, you want to know, right?
Absolutely.
And you need to know to get help that you need, right?
Yes.
You need to know whether or not you have an income in the first place. Remember where your streams of revenue are coming from. All those things are important in sustaining your household and your family. And again, then when one thing gets knocked, you have depression, you have mental health issues, guys, because it's really hard once those big issues occur, especially with the roof over your head. I know my husband and I have looked at each other multiple times and been like, wow, this is not a big house, but we're so proud of it.
As you should be.
And everyone should be proud of where they live.
Yes, I agree with that. And speaking of that, we got a comment. Welcome, Natasha Ane. Thank you for being in the comments. She says, but landlords get away with mold. And her part 2, constructive evictions are hard to fight or avoid when some laws are often stacked in favor of the landlord more than the renter.
Yeah, so that's why. So the city did launch an escrow program. And if you have a problem with your living situation and it's significant enough, not even if it's significant enough, if you have a problem, you can always call us and we'll give you some guidance. But ultimately, if it is like a water issue, if it's a mold issue, if it's those big things, which 6 out of every 10 cases, there is a big major repair issue. And again, certificates of compliance need to be adhered to. Anyway, so getting back to that, the escrow program, the intention, right, is to alert the landlord, hey, you need to make this repair before you can actually have this rent. And it protects both the landlord and the renter, in that if the landlords like to say, well, no one will pay me if it's this problem, and it just kind of keeps rolling on, right? But in reality, if you escrow your payment, right, then they have an obligation. The city has to give them a certificate of compliance before your money gets to their hands. And a whole bunch of other things can happen through that. But I think that's really important to know, that you have the right to withhold rent. You have to do it the right way, but you have that right. You should, again, be proud of where you live.
Yes.
If you are being provided less than livable conditions. There even some livable, but like that one thing is actually like mold. Maybe you can live there to some degree, but is it causing health issues that you don't know? I mean, come on, right?
Exactly.
Like, be realistic. So the escrow program, I do think, is a good thing. We also at UCHC have a tenant withholding account. So if you do have financial issues where you're not going to qualify for the escrow program because you don't have enough money to pay rent. But again, you don't have the money to pay rent because you stayed in a hotel because of the issues that are at your house. We do have a TWA program, and it's basically it's the same as the escrow program, but we work with you on your legal situation, and we can represent you from there and give you guidance on how to navigate that. Back to education, right?
Very good. She has a response. Detroit housing inspection will come out, but no real punitive sanctions are given to deter. And when you have the HCV/Section 8, you cannot withhold rent. Interesting.
Yeah, so you should be alerting HUD if there's a bigger issue. You should be getting with DHC and saying, hey, like we need to talk about this. This is not acceptable.
Right.
Outside of that, I don't disagree. I think that there has not been real punitive events that have happened. However, I do think the city administration is starting to lean in that way. Mayor Sheffield has talked a lot about, that kind of repercussion with blight tickets. I think any of you are familiar with the Real Token case, where there was a very large landlord that purchased a lot of properties based on cryptocurrencies, and we're involved in this, but not with assisting the tenants, because we're, again, fierce tenant advocates, in paying and kind of navigating the situation. They incurred over $500,000 in blight tickets, and that's why they got to go to court. But now, right, they do have to get COCs. We are collecting the rent until they get the COC, and that's when they actually can get paid out some of the funds, right? But more of that needs to happen.
Yes,
certainly the systems need to also be created so it can happen. So I have real hope that Mayor Sheffield will help figure this out and push it forward. I recognize that landlords can have, let's be honest, like there can be situations where they can't afford. Well, they should be educated at the front end before becoming a landlord of what the cost of being a landlord.
That's true, Bridget. It comes with the territory. That's a big responsibility if you want to be in the business of providing housing. Yes.
Yeah. Owning a property does not make you someone that should be eligible for being a landlord, right? You need to really know what the tenant's rights are, and you should have certificates. Your place should be okay for someone to live in. If you live there, you should make someone else live there. So I'm hoping that kind of takes off. I think the Real Token case is the first real effort and real push into it. But the city has said that they would like others to follow, and I think that's a really, really good idea.
Wow. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments. We're going to put it back over to Mr. Reid so we can wrap up. This has been a very informative conversation. Back to you, Mr. Reid.
Absolutely. This has been a terrific conversation. I have one more question before we sign off, and that is, I have friends that have purchased housing through land contracts. Some of them right now are dealing with foreclosure because they they're shorthanded on their taxes, property taxes, and so forth. Do you guys help them out with that?
So we do land contract buyouts. So if there's a struggle, we could potentially look at the case, examine, is this somebody that would qualify for our work? And then we would buy out the property. So we would then retain the deed and they would just pay us. And then at the end of their land contract, they would be the deed holder. And in that, we could potentially add the property taxes or any other issues that have occurred that would make it unaffordable. We could step in and add that to the loan. And we don't increase the loans, right? The only thing would be a filing fee that we add onto the existing payoff.
Wow.
And it's a 0% interest. So we're very fortunate.
That's great to know.
It is.
Yeah, to be able to do that. And we're actually working on another pilot where we hope that, there's some basic language, because there's a lot of sneaky stuff that happens with land contracts. So we're working on some basic language that anybody can use across the city to make sure that they're not entering a predatory situation. So I would say have your friends reach out to us and we'll investigate it. Absolutely. Often we pick people up in court that were experiencing land contract issues, but all the better for not having it to have to get to that point. So we'd certainly be willing to navigate it and see if there's something we can do.
All right. I've got the phone number to reach
Absolutely.
out to
I will
UCHC
definitely let them know of the information.
Great. Thank you so much for having me tonight. This is great.
Thank you.
I just love talking about what we do, and our counselors are
Thank
amazing.
you so much.
Your stories are so helpful, and your questions are great. This is good.
Absolutely. Well, Mr.
Thank you
Reid,
so much
thank you
so much for being here.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you so
joining.
much for being here. We definitely enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. I hope that we can do this again, maybe
Sounds
even
great.
on a monthly basis, Bridget,
Absolutely.
because as you mentioned, awareness and education is so important. Hi, Arnetta Marie. She says her first home was bought through land contract. There's many opportunities out here, and that's why we're doing this, to get the word out on what resources exist. So thank you again, Bridget.
Yeah.
And you want to close us out? Are we done for the evening, Mr. Reid?
We are pretty much done for the evening. In 2 weeks, guys, I'm going to do an open forum. So what I would like all of my listeners and listeners around Facebook, YouTube, you guys, I want you to guys send me some questions on what you would like to be shown in the next couple of weeks. My email address is biglen040@comcast.net. And we are here to talk about Detroit culture, past and present, and see what we can do as a community to focus on getting things better, not only in Detroit, but nationally as well. So if you guys are interested, leave me an email and we'll go from there. And signing off, everyone have a good Tuesday night. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Bridget. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Share and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.